My name is Christina Taylor, and I am the adult child of emotionally immature parents. Almost 3 years ago, I found myself in a very difficult place with the relationship between myself and my daughter. I spent a few months trying to improve the circumstances of our relationship based on the tools and the knowledge that I had at that stage of life. But after a few months, I realized that I wasn't making much, if any, progress. So I decided to take a step back and kind of look at who else can I reach out to? Who else can I call to communicate about the issues I'm experiencing that can help me? So I began to give consideration to my network, so to speak, to my friends and family. And as I sat there and I thought about the people I knew, I came to realize that I actually don't know of anybody, friends or family, that has ever encountered challenges in their relationship that has intentionally worked to identify the issue, get to the root cause of it, and go through whatever process is necessary for them to both come out on the other side happier, healthier, and better as a result of intentionally working through the issue to become better. So I found myself taking a step back again to give thought and consideration to what do I do? Who can I reach out to? And I ended up reaching out to a therapist, and I only wish I would have reached out sooner, like 20, maybe 30 years sooner. I reached out to a therapist though, and I began my journey in therapy. And as I began this journey, it required me to really look at the life experiences that negatively impacted me, especially those that are from my childhood. And when I began to do this, it took me back to about the age of 5. And at the age of 5, my memories are really connected with these feelings of I don't feel like I fit in within this family. I don't feel like I belong within this family. And I don't know what's wrong, but something is not right within this family. Something is off. Something's just not right within this family. And as a child, I was unable to communicate what it is that I was feeling, especially about something being off within my family, because there was no specific thing that I could point out or communicate that this is the problem or that's the problem, or it was just this feeling on the inside, this intense feeling of something is off, something is not right. So I continued on with life and just kept my feelings to myself because I didn't know how to express what I was experiencing on the inside. I didn't have the language to do it. I didn't feel comfortable enough to do it. So I kept it to myself. And as years went by, these feelings, they continued to grow in intensity. And when I got to about the age of 13, maybe 14, middle school years, this is the age when children begin hanging with their friends with less adult supervision, and in some cases, no adult supervision. So at this time in my life, I began hanging around friends, and there were instances where there was less adult supervision, and there were instances where there was no adult supervision. But I began to hang around this friend group that was engaged in smoking alcohol and drinking weed, and I deeply desired to feel like I fit in, to feel like I belonged within this friend group. So I found myself adapting to the ways of this group to feel like I fit in, to feel like I belonged. I began smoking weed, I began drinking alcohol, and I eventually became sexually active in my teenage years. And I continued on with these unhealthy coping mechanisms, although they did not get rid of these uncomfortable feelings and emotions. It gave me moments of temporary relief where I didn't have to feel them for this period of time when I was utilizing whatever coping mechanism I was using. So I continued on with them because I didn't have another way to manage this internal discomfort. And I didn't feel safe communicating with anybody about it because, again, I didn't really know how to express it to anybody, but I also didn't feel comfortable enough to share it with anybody. So I continued with these unhealthy coping mechanisms, and as time went on, I found myself in my adult years still with these unhealthy coping mechanisms. And at the age of 24, I became pregnant. And when I found out I was pregnant, my deepest and biggest desire was I don't ever want my daughter to feel the pain that I felt in my childhood. I don't ever want her to feel like she doesn't fit in, like she doesn't belong, and like something is wrong within this family. So I went to the library and I found myself looking for books to help me become a better parent, to become a good parent. And I checked out a few books, maybe 3 or 4. I read these books and I took notes on the books that I read. And before I knew it, the 9 months was over. My daughter was here. And if I'm being honest, I never read those notes again. And I never read those books again. And I don't really recall implementing much of anything that I read in the books because I don't know. When my daughter was born, it was just like I stepped into being a mother and it was just full speed ahead. And I never really stopped to give thought or consideration to what I had read in the book or the notes that I took. But even if I would have, it really wouldn't have, I don't think it would have really given me the results that I was looking for. It would have improved circumstances, but I don't think it would have given me the results that I was looking for. So now my daughter is born and I am still continuing life with these internal feelings that are intense still of I don't feel like I fit in and I don't feel like I belong within my family and I don't know what's wrong, but something's not right. And I also continued smoking weed and drinking alcohol to suppress this internal emotional discomfort that I was battling with. And 16 and a half, almost 17 years into my parenting journey is when I realized that I was having some issues in the relationship between myself and my daughter. And as a result of these issues, it is what led me to go to therapy. And a few months into therapy, my therapist recommended a book for me. And the name of this book is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. And in this book, Lindsay Gibson is explaining, detailing, and providing information that is making everything that I've been feeling on the inside make sense. She is explaining how important our emotional needs are. She is explaining the impact of not having your emotional needs met. She is giving language to the things that I was experiencing on the inside that I didn't know how to communicate. She's literally giving me the tools to help me in my biggest and deepest desire when I became pregnant with my daughter, of not wanting my daughter to feel the pain that I felt in my childhood. She's giving me the tools to make that a reality. But at this point, we are 17 years and counting into the parenting journey. So I continued reading this book, and man, reading this book it was definitely intense for me. And it really just shed light on so many experiences that I've had throughout my life. It explained the issues that I was battling, it explained my family dynamic, and it really, really, really helped me to understand what the issue was. And the issue was that, like I've mentioned, I am the adult child of emotionally immature parents. And as a result of that, my parents are good parents. I want to make that clear. My parents, they were married for 50 years until death did them part. My parents both worked full-time jobs to provide for the family they created. My parents were not alcoholics, they weren't drug addicts, they were not physically abusive to each other or to their children. My parents, they provided for all of our physical needs. They made sure we always had a roof over our head, food, clothing, water, and medical care when needed. But that is kind of the extent of the needs that were met. And as a result of being the adult child of emotionally immature parents, there was this gap, this void, these unmet needs that left this emotional loneliness gap, this void within. And it made me realize also that not only am I the adult child of emotionally immature parents, but I am also from and a member of a dysfunctional family. So all of these terms and all of this language is coming to me and now making sense to help everything kind of come together, so to speak. And eventually I get to a point where I realize that I too have become an emotionally immature parent of a now adult child. And when I realized that, it really bothered me, and it created this desire in me of, I must figure out, like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? I have to understand more. I can't just accept that I am an emotionally immature parent of a now adult child. I have to understand why. I have to understand how. I have to understand when, where. Like, I need answers. So I found myself going on this journey of inquiring about the life experiences that negatively impacted the people that came before me. So I started with my parents. I started to inquire about the life experiences of my parents that negatively impacted them, especially in their childhood. And after I found out what I found out about my parents, I found the need to go back another generation into the life experiences of my grandparents that negatively impacted them in their childhood. And I decided I have to go back another generation. I have to go back and learn what I can about the life experiences of my great grandparents that negatively impacted them in their childhood. And every time I went back a generation, there was this pattern that kept surfacing, this pattern of they were all the adult children of emotionally immature parents. So I began to think, how is this happening? Like, I see the pattern is there. I see it, but how is this happening? I still don't really have the answers to the how, the why, the when, the where. So I began to give thought and consideration to the ways of the world into which my parents, grandparents, and great grandparents were born into. My parents were born into a world where segregation was legal, meaning it was okay for white people to treat people of color, black people, poorly solely based on the color of their skin. It was okay to deny them for housing in certain communities. It was okay to deny them for jobs based on the color of their skin. It was okay to make them sit in certain areas of buses based on the color of their skin. It was okay to treat them less than based on the color of their skin. This behavior was normal. It was acceptable. It was the way of the world. And they were going into their teenage years before the law was ever passed that made segregation illegal. My grandparents, they were born into a world where segregation was legal, and they lived the majority of their lives, maybe 75, 80% of their lives was lived in a world where segregation was legal. It was normal. It was the way of the world. My great grandparents, same story. They were born into a world where segregation was legal, it was normal, it was acceptable, and they also were born into a world where I'm not exactly sure how far away they were, but I know they weren't far enough away that they weren't still feeling the impacts of the centuries where slavery was legal. So they were also born into a world where they were still experiencing dehumanizing, unethical, immoral, cruel, horrific, extremely traumatizing experiences that were birthed out of a time where slavery was legal and continued on. And everybody else that came before them, I am confident that they were living in a world where those experiences were more intense and as I came to understand the ways of the world into which my parents, grandparents, great grandparents, and everybody else that came before them was born into, I began to really give thought and consideration to the impact that these experiences from the ways of the world had on them and their emotional and mental well-being. And I realized that I'm not sure if there's any one person that can be held accountable for the impact of emotional immaturity in the world, but there are certainly a handful, many handfuls of experiences that have greatly contributed to the emotional immaturity of every race. But for African Americans and white people, slavery had a huge impact on the emotional immaturity of these two races. And I say that because slave masters, they convinced themselves that people of color did not have feelings, They didn't have emotions and they couldn't feel pain. They convinced themselves to believe that human or black people were less than human. So they didn't deserve to be treated like humans. They, in their mind, they convinced themselves that it was acceptable to treat people poorly because their skin is a different color from theirs. And they did this because it brought financial benefits to them, amongst other resources. And they did this also because they had to explain away the cognitive dissonance that they were experiencing internally. They also had to explain it away for their children, for their spouses, for their other family members and friends. So they convinced themselves that black people don't have feelings, they don't have emotions, and they can't feel pain. They experimented on black people as if they were, I don't know, lab rats or some wild animals, inflicting horrific pain on black people. They hung us from trees. They raped us. They turned our children into slaves. They did horrific, unexplainable, hurtful, harmful things to people of color just because they could. But they also had to convince people of color that their feelings and emotions don't matter. And they did this by inflicting horrific pain on people of color, by raping women and forcing them to carry on and keep working to produce gain for them at the expense of their emotional and mental well-being for black people. They did this by taking young children, young black children from their parents and raping the children and killing children and turning young children into slaves at the first sign of looking like they might be a good worker to produce more benefit for white people. They did this by beating black people for whatever reason. Maybe they felt they had the wrong tone in their voice when they responded to them. Maybe they didn't respond quick enough. Maybe they didn't produce enough. Whatever the reason was, they did this by beating black people with whips, watching their flesh bust open as a result of the whip creating gashes in their skin and leaving them there to die in some instances, and forcing the loved ones to watch this horrific experience and be required to keep working and carrying on with life as if nothing happened. And there are so many experiences that have conditioned us as black people to minimize and dismiss our feelings and emotions because we have been trained to just perform, to produce, to go, 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 regardless of how we feel. And these experiences, they compromised our emotional integrity. They compromised our ability to be honest with ourselves about what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. And the mindsets, the beliefs, the behaviors that were forced on our ancestors, they are actually still traveling with us and inside of us at this current day, because we have become so afraid to process our feelings and emotions and to really understand what they are communicating with us. Because although during times of slavery, that behavior actually served us well, as crazy as that sounds, it served us well because it was a survival skill. It's not serving us well now because it is trapping us in this place of only surviving and limiting, and in some cases preventing us from thriving. And you can see this in some of the behaviors that parents model with their children today. Like if a little boy falls, we tell the little boy things like, get up, brush it off, shake it off, don't cry, don't be no punk, don't be no bitch, like stop crying. Real men, real boys don't cry. If you fall and get hurt, it's not a crime to cry. It's actually a normal, healthy human response. But that instance right there, that is a adult, a parent, a leader conditioning a young child to ignore their feelings, to override what they are experiencing internally, because somewhere along the way it was conditioned into them previously in their childhood that it's unacceptable for human beings of a certain race to cry or to express emotion. We see it in women that teach their young girls that it is their job to make sure that they dress appropriately, behave appropriately, and make sure that they carry themselves in such a way that they don't stir up emotions of arousal in a male, because if they do, it is the male's or it is the female's fault for creating emotional excitement within them that may lead to a male sexually abusing or assaulting a woman. We are in a time in life where it is no longer serving us well to ignore our feelings and emotions, to deny them, or not have a healthy connection with them. Although it served us well during slavery to help us survive those horrific times, it's not serving us well now. And I came to realize that when our emotional integrity has been compromised at an extremely young age, it prevents us from maturing emotionally. And when we don't mature emotionally, and that emotional immaturity goes with us into adulthoods, it creates adults that are emotionally immature. And when two emotionally immature adults come together and create a child, it now creates the foundation of a dysfunctional family. So as I continued on my journey of trying to figure out what, when, where, how, why, of me becoming an emotionally immature parent of a now adult child, I realized that I am the adult child of emotionally immature parents. I am also born into a dysfunctional family. And about 7 or 8 months ago, I said to another person that our family is dysfunctional. And this person responded and said, nobody's got a perfect family. Like, what is it with you? Like, everybody's family has problems. Like, nobody's got a perfect family. And I absolutely agree. Everybody's family has problems. Nobody's family is perfect. I absolutely agree. But what I don't agree on is that the opposite of dysfunctional is not perfect. The opposite of dysfunctional is functional. And yes, there are many, many, many dysfunctional families in the world, but there are also many, many functional families in the world. And the difference between a functional family versus a dysfunctional family is that a dysfunctional family has had their emotional integrity compromised at such a young age that it stunted their development emotionally, turning them into an emotionally immature person for their age. And as they continue to get older, the emotional maturity level never grew, it never matured, it stayed at a young age. So as I began to go into my adolescent years and teenage years and adult years, and some aspects based on experiences that I've had in my childhood, my maturity level emotionally was still that of a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old. And when we don't mature emotionally, it creates these internal wounds inside where we are always trying to get those emotional needs / wounds healed, repaired, met. But because we don't know how to, and our emotional development is so far behind us in comparison to our age, we are still behaving as the person who was 6, 7, 8, 9. And when you create that dynamic that travels with you into adulthood, and you, as an emotionally immature adult, become a parent, and you have that foundation of emotional immaturity, it creates the dysfunctional family. Because dysfunctional families are unable, and in some cases unwilling, to intentionally work to identify the root cause of issues, work through the process of resolving the issues, and get to the other side happier, healthier, and better. Dysfunctional families will say things like, that's just the way I am. I'm like that with everybody. And that's how they excuse their poor behavior, because I'm like that with everybody. It doesn't matter. Our dysfunctional family members and families will say things like, your feelings don't matter. You're just too sensitive. You need to get some thicker skin. Dysfunctional families will ignore members of the family that are being hurt, whether it's physically hurt, emotionally hurt, sexually hurt. I should actually change it from hurt to abuse. Dysfunctional families will ignore members of the family that are being physically abused, emotionally abused, sexually abused, because in order to acknowledge this pain, you now have to acknowledge that there is an issue and you have to work to find a solution. But when you have not matured emotionally, it is extremely challenging to find that solution because so much of your identity is wrapped up in the emotional immaturity and the dysfunction that has developed over the years in order to help you survive the dysfunction that you were raised in. And when it continues to go unchecked, it creates the dysfunction in the children that the dysfunctional parents create. Functional families, they don't deny it. They don't dismiss it. They don't distort the reality of what it is that's going on. Functional families, when there is an issue, functional families talk about it. Functional families intentionally work to acknowledge the behavior, identify the root cause, and work through the issues, the challenges for everybody in the family to come through on the other side happier and healthier. Functional families are families where everybody does well. And by does well, this has nothing to do with money. Functional families are family systems where everybody is doing well or nobody's doing well. Dysfunctional families are families that wear this mask of we've got money, so we don't have problems. Dysfunctional families are families that believe, oh, we are athletes. We are all basketball stars in this family, so we don't have problems. Dysfunctional families are families that believe that these images that they present to the world have to be upheld at all times in order to present to the world that everything is okay. And we use a lot of things to present these images to the world that we are okay. We use material things, we use money, we use status, we use titles, all trying to present to the world that we are okay. We're also trying to present to ourselves that we're okay. But inside, we know we're not okay. So I continue to sit with everything that I learned, realizing that, yes, I am the adult child of emotionally immature parents. Yes, I too became an emotionally immature parent of a now adult child. But as I kept digging, and realizing that there is a dynamic to a dysfunctional family, I realized the role that I played in my dysfunctional family. And in my dysfunctional family, I was the scapegoat, meaning that in my dysfunctional family, all of the shame and uncomfortable feelings and emotions were placed on my shoulders to bear. So everybody else is unable and or unwilling to manage their feelings and emotions. And in dysfunctional families, there is a codependency on everybody else to manage another member's feelings and emotions, to make it seem like everything is normal, to make it seem like everything is okay. And my role was the scapegoat. It was my job to not have boundaries, to shrink myself. It was my role to not speak up about things that were hurtful and harmful to me. It was my role to carry the emotional discomfort of the family. So I was able to really get down to the root cause of why it is that I felt at such a young age that I don't feel like I fit in within this family. I don't feel like I belong within this family. And I don't know what's wrong with this family, but something is off. Something's not right and it needs to change. Not only did I get understanding for that, but I also got the understanding of why it is that I was so unsuccessful in achieving my desire of not ever or preventing my daughter from experiencing the pain that I experienced in my childhood. It's because I didn't realize the impact of the experiences from my childhood, but not only that, I didn't understand the impact of the experiences from my childhood. I didn't understand why I had these feelings. I didn't know how to process those feelings and emotions. I didn't understand how to be a human. And I realized that I used to think it was just me. I used to think it was just my family. But as I went on this journey of healing, I realized it's not just me. Not only is it not just me, it's not just my family. It is way bigger than I ever thought. It's just that everybody else was doing the same thing my family was doing. We were all putting on these masks trying to make it seem like we're good, we're great, we got it. Because we're all pursuing the finances and the material things and the titles and all of these other things to make us seem like we have it together, when the truth is those things don't make us, they don't erase the trauma of the past. They don't erase the pain and the hurt from the past. And so many of us are unintentionally, I also learned that none of my parents, grandparents, great grandparents, nobody is intentionally passing this dysfunction along. But unless we start being honest with ourselves and then start getting honest within our families, this dysfunction will continue to go from one generation to the next. And when I found out that I was an emotionally immature parent of a now adult child, baby, the fire that ignited in me, I will not allow this dysfunction to go any further. I have decided it ends with me. So I am sharing my story so that you can realize you're not alone, you're not crazy, you're not losing your mind, to help you have maybe a better understanding of why it is that your family is the way it is, or help you have a better understanding of how it's not necessarily a blame game of blaming your parents, your grandparents. I'm sharing my story because I want you to know that you can protect your children from the pain of your childhood. I'm sharing my story because I believe it's going to help set somebody else free. So I hope that you enjoyed and found something valuable in what I've shared. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.